So good. Well, good day to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be on another one of the Asgardia webinars. This one with a legend, an absolute legend when it comes to the space sector and beyond. Probably the coolest chief executive that exists, Kevin Seymour. Kevin, it's a great pleasure to have you on this webinar.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. I'm sure Elon would have something to say about that, but there you go. We'll try and compete.
Well, I don't think Elon was ever a fighter pilot, was he?
No, but I don't think he's done too badly though.
Hey, why don't you talk to us a little bit about your background, your introduction, your connection to space, what you're doing, the cool things you're doing at Astraeus.
Sure. I think really it all started back in sort of 2010. I was on the Navy staff, but I'm ex-Navy for 34 years, a fighter pilot by trade. But I had to grow up at some point. So in '09, they took the jet away. I had to grow into some sort of staff role. I did a lot of carrier work and F-35 work, but as an aside, that was my first introduction into space and cyber. From there, the interest sort of matured through the sort of 2010 to 2020 era. And really, the opportunity came along for us in terms of what the UK was trying to do, and an introduction I'd had by chance to an old fighter guy. So yeah, many beers in the bar and hands in the bar, and we were discussing something which was quite cool, which actually then came on to be Astrius. So if you look at where Astrius came from, it's not wrong to say the idea stemmed in a bar. So as all good ideas do. Um, so the real crux of it was we were looking to see at a way we could answer Boris Johnson's challenge in terms of, for the UK, how we could get a sovereign launch capability. Quite difficult to do, it's quite expensive to do. And so because of the access that we had and the understanding that we had of a horizontal solution, it was completely different to Virgin Orbit, although people do try to draw parallels. The fact that it was already used by the Missile Defense Agency, it was mature technology. And therefore, the discussion was on about, well, why would you create something from scratch that costs lots and lots of money, has a high risk of failure, and is not really embracing mature technology that's out there. So the idea from us was that we would answer the Boris Johnson challenge, which I think we have. The difficulty I have is I don't think at the same time, whilst the UK can say it has ambition, I think the Virgin Orbit piece was demonstrated that it probably could have been done in a different way. It's kind of rushed. Unfortunately, what happened, but you've seen nothing since then. And I think that there's a lot of aspiration, of which we are one, and we can go on to a bunch of subjects as to why it's either slowed down or whatever. But for us in Astrius, it was a completely different way of doing business. So outsource everything, go to mature technology, do a horizontal launch. We'll come on to why the benefits of that, I guess, in a minute. And for that, Astrius is born. And the other thing is, as part of the deal inside Scotland, of course, Glasgow is a hub for small sat production. So why would you not have something that's just down the road? So it all kind of came together in 2020, 2021 with a company that was we born the company out there, and it's grown ever since then.
I mean, a lot of lessons learned, I suppose, right? As you say, the UK called out we want sort of sovereignty in the launch of our satellites, but why not go the traditional routes? I mean, put satellites up like other nations put satellites up. Why innovate in different ways of doing it, and why do it from Scotland, which is not well known for having the best weather in the world?
Yeah, I mean, great questions, and actually really relevant to where we are today. So Asturias today has uh, interest, some beyond interest, from 12 countries. And you go, well, why is that? And you go, that's because the cost of infrastructure to build infrastructure for the vertical launched capabilities is very expensive. Once you've got it, it's fine. But these nations now are realizing, especially with what's going on in the global climate, they want a sovereign capability. They want to be able to protect their assets, whatever they've got, from a sovereign nation perspective. And therefore, the quickest way to do that is horizontal launch. So they've recognized that. They've come to us and go, hey, we've got an airfield. All you need is an integration facility. I land the airplane, put the launch vehicle into the integration facility, put the satellites on, and go. Done. None of that infrastructure, none waiting. As long as the regulation is there, it's the quickest way. And that's what we're now seeing. Whether that was recognized from a Virgin Orbit perspective, I very much doubt it. But what we see in the UK is very much now a traditional route with vertical launch. And as far as we're concerned, right now we offer the only truly horizontal solution that's out there.
And perhaps explain, because it is really cool, perhaps explain what vertical launch means when it comes to satellites, and particularly in the context of cost saving, particularly in the context of being able to avoid, the constant things we see in Florida about it's not quite the right weather or the sun isn't pointing at quite the right angle. In a world in which, satellites are ever more important, we're ever more dependent on them, and where there's talk for the private sector of putting so many more up, why is horizontal launch an improvement on vertical launch?
Oh, now we're going to get into dangerous territory. So let me put this in this way: we are not trying to compete with SpaceX. The might of which behind the financial backing they've got behind and the way they do stuff is just so impressive, and on the scale that they do. What we are doing is offering something that is the cheapest way to market for a new country to get a space capability. Without a shadow of a doubt, probably they will want a mixture. I see vertical and horizontal as very complementary, and one's not trying to do what the other one does. And people often think that. That may be the case in certain circumstances, but horizontal has certain advantages, of which you've touched on some. Firstly, we're not bound by geography. So I can take off from an airfield and go north or south. I can do an equatorial, or I can do a vertical, a polar launch. I'm not bound by weather, as you say. So, a lot of the launches at Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg are late because of weather or some sort of factor like that. Well, I don't have that. I can go out to an area, I can launch north or south, and I'm not bound. So for a customer, pretty much I can guarantee it's going to happen on the day they want it. The other thing is, which is really, really cool, is I can take off, launch, because it's an unmodified C-17, literally land, reload again, and go. And what that means is, in terms of satellite weights these days, we can put up a constellation in an afternoon. So if there's a solar flare or whatever, if you take at its bare minimum sort of 12 as a constellation, we can do that. Okay, the Elon Musk's as well, they can put up whatever it is in one go, but actually we can put up, in terms of what we carry, a constellation in an afternoon in two very specific orbits. So we don't rely on either orbital transfer. So, Elon will launch something on a ride share. 3 months later, it may actually get to where it wants to go. We can put it for a customer exactly where they want it to be. and start reaping the rewards from that. So from a financial perspective, they can see a return rather than waiting 3 months. And that seems to have got a lot of traction. So when you look at from a UK perspective, the fantastic work, don't get me wrong, that's going on up in Saxe-Ford, Sutherland and Orbex, etc., etc. And I wish them every success. But what we're actually seeing, and this is really crucial, I think, right now, is from 2021. You go back to Euroconsole then. The prediction was in 25 you would start to see consolidation in the market. Why? Because everybody, as soon as this space thing came, I'm gonna be another Elon, and I'm gonna launch a rocket of 250 kilograms or 200 kilograms or whatever. Well, what's happened subsequently is obviously the global crisis has changed the world. The second thing is satellite weights are now getting bigger again. So it dipped down to the smallest, now going back up again towards a 200 kg mark. Why? Because it's more capable. And what you naturally find is, unless you can diversify, and we can come on to that as well, what that means. You're in a situation where naturally consolidation will take place, or it becomes too expensive to come into the market. And if you look at, for example, ABL recently, the announcement they're going to now not focus on LEO, they're going to focus back towards hypersonics. And I think you're just going to see this gradually go on throughout the globe to do that. We, on the other hand, we targeted our capability at the weights we've got. We are effectively indifferent to what goes on around the world. It doesn't matter to us. We have the unique capabilities, and Farnborough this year proved a great success for us in highlighting some of those. So, Scotland will be great for polar launch, but that's all it is, and relatively small weights. So that's if we can get around the weather and the regulation.
Well, we'll come on to regulation in a minute, but I do want you to bring to life, how amazing the facility is, because let's say I'm working at the University of Oxford and we build a satellite, and we come to you and say, look, we would like to get this up to this particular position. Could you help us? How does it work in practice? How do you help me take my satellite and position it up in space?
So let me give you a real cool sort of end of spectrum thing that I had a discussion right at the very stage here. When I was talking with Surrey Satellites, who are a very cool bunch of guys, and they were very, very warming and helpful to what we were trying to do. I can come to you. And people go, what do you mean I can come to you? I can come to you. Give me an airfield near you. I'll come to you and pick it up and go. You don't have to keep coming to me. You can come to me if you like, but and that's the nirvana, where we have a launch vehicle, a mobile clean room, etc., etc. Land, I'll come to you, do what we need to do, let's go. Find somewhere else in the industry that does that. They don't. Now, you could say that's fairly niche, but actually niche is good. And to survive right now, you have to be different, because everybody does the same thing, more or less. So you have to be different. You have to be able to diversify. You have to have niche capabilities, and that's what we have. So in terms of, someone who builds a satellite, okay, just take it, they do the traditional route. They'll come to us and they'll go, hey, I've got this, I need it to go there. And you'll go, okay, when do you want it to go? Where do you want it to go? They may go, and this is another cool thing, is the facility has been designed from the satellite manufacturer perspective. It's not from our perspective. We've got experts in, this is what we need, this is what we want. So it's all about them. And I think if I'm a little bit disingenuous, maybe, and I apologize, but I don't, is, the Virgin Orbit piece was quite a show. And I think in terms of what was there, the customer needs were almost last. In this case, the customer needs are always first. Where do you want to go? How do you want to go? What the regularity of it is. Obviously, there'll be a price point and stuff, etc. We can have those discussions. But the point being is we are very competitive in the market. We can go to some very, very unique positions. And I think in terms of who that manufacturer is, if they have niche capabilities that either GovMill want to put into a specific place and they need it now, we can come on to what that means in terms of responsiveness. But if they need it now, or want it very specific, then we can provide that. And that's the beauty of what we offer. It's not a ride share piece.
Well, exactly. So you can fly the is it not C-130, but anyway, you fly the very large cargo plane down, land it nearby. They deliver the satellite. But what about the rocket? How's it going? How when you drop it out of the back, you don't just sort of throw it out of the back of the plane and hope for the best. So the complexity about positioning that satellite in the right place. How do you do that?
Okay, without getting too technical here, and I love your throat. You speak like my CFO would. So because it's an unmodified C-17, we carry the software that tells the rocket where to go and how to do that, and that's well understood. The point being is there are various launch corridors that exist, whether north or south. And from that, we can predict where we need to fly the C-17 to from wherever it is. If it's a host base, one of the host bases or Prestwick, for example, or everything can be pre-planned and you can go. But the beauty again is it's very, very easy for us to reposition to somewhere else, whether there's a foul range, somebody changes their mind, or there's a technical issue that we need to move, or what have you, or dare I say, a solar event or some event that, hey, I need to delay by 2 hours or whatever. None of that is a big deal because it can be done. That's the flexibleness that we have. So it's really easy for us to pretty much accommodate everything that the customer will need. And I think the crucial fact is, what's it going to cost me? When's it going to be ready? What can you do? And then hopefully we then get into a string of a series of contracts there with specific users. The other thing is, when you talk about responsiveness, we can touch on that because responsiveness is a big deal right now. So in terms of what that means, I think from a customer perspective, we cover all the bases. And
just a question on that, if I may. So if I've made the satellite, who's building the rocket?
So we have gone out to industry with that. I won't say who is, but it's a well-known defense prime. And this is the whole idea, is when you take existing mature technology and embrace a launch mechanism that has been used over 40 times successfully, and a top end, for example, our third stage that has some unique capabilities. All of it is based upon tried and tested technology. If you look at the recent failures there, and if you can look at Virgin Orbit as well, there have been a lot of failures as a result of embrace. A failure is part of the journey in space. Unfortunately, though, what I think has been happening is that's happened more and more of late as people push the boundaries of technology. And for us, this is a message loud and clear at Farnborough. I go, well, why would I do that? In Branson, it cost him 1.2 billion to get to where he got to in terms of infrastructure and launch vehicles. My infrastructure is very, very scaled down. I've got a runway that already exists. The technology is already out there. I've just woken up one morning and going, well, why don't I put the ting on the ting? You know, engineers will hate me for that, but that's the way it is. You know, and make it really simple, and therefore my chances of failure in terms of risk is the lowest it can be. I'm not challenged by the cost of new infrastructure. I'm not challenged by the cost of, the risk of new infrastructure. And so, from my perspective, I de-risk all round. And low cost, low risk is what the industry is looking for.
Absolutely. You did say there in one of your recent articles that one of the challenges that you do face, it's not risk, it's not cost. One of the challenges you do face is sticking within regulations and policies. What's the regulation and policy about launching satellites up into space? I mean, your private sector, so to some extent, the Space Act doesn't apply. The 67 Act. Where are the constraints for you if you can take your plane in up at, over international waters, up at 40, 50,000 feet, and sorry to use the phrase, chuck the thing out the back and let it do its thing. What are the regulations and policies that you think might be constraining the sector, or that you feel might be challenging?
So let's be really clear that without a shadow of a doubt, the US is the leader in this, and the way it approaches its policy is very different from other nations. That could lead to a situation whereby anybody that's breaking into the market, and certainly what we do, why would we go anywhere else but launch from the US? And you go, there's a whole bunch of reasons why I wouldn't do that. But from a regulatory perspective, like, for example, Australia embraces the US regulations and almost grandfather rights down there. So they've embraced the concept of what could happen from the US. In terms of the UK, though, and we love to do this. We go through our own route. We reinvent the wheel, although they claim they don't. And we end up with a situation where, if you look at the regulation for what we have done for vertical launch, it's taken a long time to get there. Even if you look at the way the regulatory piece was knitted together for Virgin, which was quite a difficult one. And people don't grasp this, the fact that because you have a 747 with a rocket effectively strapped on, what you now do is you, in fact, limit the range at which the 747 can fly, both from an aerodynamic perspective and once you've launched the rocket and in balance and all the rest of it. I won't go into it, but the bottom line is you limit that. And then when you do, as they did, a southern trajectory that now goes over land, now you've got issues. We, on the other hand, in C-17, I can go to the middle of the Atlantic and I can loiter there for almost 2 hours of full fuel, even with it loaded, and go wherever I need to go. I'm not bound by the same regulatory piece. So, bless them, the CAA will tell me that when I take off, say, from Prestwick, because I take off from Prestwick, I'm bound by CAA regulations. I'm in international airspace. And against the letter of the law, I do get that. I do understand. But to get them to understand, this is a really easy concept. I'm going to go out over water. They asked me to do a damage assessment on fisheries. And we go, what do you understand about bloody fisheries in the middle of the Atlantic? Nothing. So the Americans, on the other hand, are very proactive. They do have the regulatory piece, a lot more liberal in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. And in terms of risk and, a LARP or whatever they want to call it these days in the UK, the UK struggled to get its head round vertical launch. And I'm sure if anybody listens to this, they will get their heckles up. But they did. But they've got there. Now I introduce a piece of horizontal launch. And I said this when we were at Farnborough. So I launch out of Prestwick with my launch vehicle and I land in Ascension. And I do an equatorial launch from Ascension. How does the regulatory situation embrace that from a UK CAA perspective? I still don't have an answer to that. And that's 2 years on.
And I think, the really fascinating thing, at least from a lawyer's point of view, is there isn't truly an answer. I mean, when the nations last came together to really consider the implications of space and launching into space in 19, I think it was 67 was the last time they came together. The contemplation was only nation states will be accessing space. So we only need these rules to apply to the acts of nations. The private sector will never be in this space. So we've already got a lacuna there when it comes to private sector. And I think historically, or in the recent past, people have said, well, let's go with the rules apply from the country where the satellite was launched. Where was it launched from, or from where was it launched? Let's just say that those rules apply. That kind of gets us there. You've created a whole new paradigm, because it isn't effectively, the satellite isn't launched from a single jurisdiction. There's no pad from which that satellite has gone. It's been shipped in the back of a large plane, and then it's been launched over international waters where there are no laws that apply. So that satellite, in a way, and the owner of that satellite is not bound by any laws or regulations on Earth. It can do what it wants without the ability for any nation to interfere. You create a sort of moving us out of what you call that Westphalian dynamic of every nation must be bounded by a geography, and the rules that exist in that geography exist everywhere that it permeates. You're breaking it down. You're creating an environment in which no laws, no rules apply. And when you go and ask regulators about it, of course, they struggle because they can't imagine a world in which no rules apply. But I think it's fascinating from a lawyer's point of view that you are asking these questions and you are challenging the environment, and hopefully the world will be able to come together, with an answer that works for you. But I suspect that they won't. I suspect that what it will drive is more nations saying, I don't want to launch from another nation and get bound by their laws and regulations. I'd rather give it to you, Kevin. You launch it from the middle of the Atlantic, where the international waters, and then I can do what I want with it.
So yeah, but take that to its extreme. I completely agree with you, and I don't have a satisfactory answer from anybody apart from the fact I know if I took off from US soil and I air-to-air refuel, because I can go where I want on the globe and launch it. And tell me how I do that from a CAA perspective. No idea. FAA are completely happy. They get it. So I'm going, the other thing is, which is an interesting one, and I thought about this the other day. There are regulatory pieces, and we saw this with Starship. There's regulatory pieces where you can launch from Texas, for example, but the re-entry and splashdown is in the Indian Ocean, and you can cover that. And you go, well, why can't you cover launching something instead of something falling down, it's something going up?
It's falling down in reverse.
Yeah, turn the world upside down and then let it go.
But you've mentioned Virgin Orbit and the challenges it had with the horizontal launch, and Spaceport Cornwall also came up on the research. What lessons are there? What lessons have you taken to make sure that yours is a success where others have struggled?
So, you don't wish ill on anybody, and I was gutted for Dan that venture didn't work in that way. But if I look at it from my perspective, there are a number of things there in terms of regulatory, both on the ground and in the air, that were hurried. And on the day, if you look at the weather, it wasn't great. Doesn't mean they couldn't launch necessarily. It wasn't great. There was a lot of hoo-ha prior to it. And was it, I raise this as a question with a wry smile, was it a coincidence that at the news at 10 and the last gong you watched Virgin taxiing out to launch. Love the PR media exercise, but is that the right thing to drive a new space capability? I say tongue in cheek a lot of these, but the lessons learned, I think, are significant. I'm significant from a positive perspective. What can I draw out of it? From a negative perspective, the other side of it is we now seem bound by some of those failures. It's a noose around our neck that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And trying to pick our way out of that has been difficult. But in terms of, the other thing with Cornwall too, I mean, it was set up for it's effectively a liquid fuel spaceport. There are certain things that would need to happen if we were going to go there, for example. But that costs money. So I now look at in the lessons learned is, and you watch the private ventures going on up in Scotland, Saxe Award, etc. Sutherland, although Orbex has now moved across to Saxe Award. Has the government now, or has the UK Space Agency now gone, you know what, park Cornwall for a minute. Let's put all our eggs, this private venture that's going on over there, I've chucked a bit of cash at it, it's going to work at some point. And I'm sure it will, which is great. But in terms of Cornwall, what's moving into Cornwall, and they call it a space cluster. Well, firstly, who's going to go all the way down to Cornwall? The second point is that truly, if we wanted a sovereign launch capability back down there, it has to be horizontal launch. And right now, we're the only people that can provide that. There are other capabilities, and we can touch on it a little bit, that could come in there. And I say the only one. Of course, we could talk about Pegasus, but I mean that's a dying one. But in terms of hypersonics is a big deal these days. And in terms of a spaceport, I mean it's not LEO, it's going to be sub-LEO, but it's still kind of cool and actually has a utility down for Cornwall. So I said I had a conversation with Matt Archer. I embrace Cornwall. I embrace Prestwick. Embrace anywhere we can go, really. The point being is, if you look, and if UK could understand this, US understands this. I'm a UK company that can have a global launch footprint because all I need is a runway. And that's why 12 nations have come to me going, we get this. We want to have you as part of our early regime, and then it's complementary to the vertical.
And it's just fantastic, as you say. It's housed in the UK, but with global, global operational, global capability. You mentioned a few times hypersonic, which does sound hyper cool. Could you tell people a bit more about that?
So in the hypersonic world, it's sub-LEO, i.e., you're not going into orbit as such. And the world we live in now is a completely different place. One of the things I bang on about in terms of surviving in the industry is you've got to be diverse. We talked a little bit about I can go to unique orbits or specific places. I can launch a constellation. All that's in LEO, which is great. But if I can do other things with my capability, such as hypersonic testing, etc., or targets, whatever you want to do, or indeed, let's take it to an ethereal place out here somewhere. I was talking to a major prime where they wanted to understand the dimensions of the payload bay. Why? Because there's other things you can do with it. And, you know, I woke up one night going, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you watch what's going on in the world? I could do either a suborbital or orbital launch of something, and I could have 50 drones in there, and I could swamp air defenses from space, or I could do logistics from space. Yeah, I'm not saying either of those is a solution. What I'm saying is, I don't have to do anything to my capability really to be able to for those diverse things, of which hypersonics is just a part of it. And hypersonics right now is you know is getting a lot of attention for all the reasons we know. So in terms of both offense and defense, there are opportunities there. And a subject which is a very, very touchy subject, access to space and protection in space. But more and more, it's going to become contested. And what a beautiful way to launch in a C-17 that could be carrying bags of rice, could be carrying people, could be carrying something that protects space assets. Nobody knows from a day-to-day, but covertly what's going on. So there are a whole bunch of themes to our mythology and the way we do it, which can lead to a very, very diverse number of opportunities should people wish to exploit it.
It's fascinating, really, because I want to touch a bit on the environmental issues. I mean, the environment is a big thing, and one of the challenges historically vertical launch is you burn most of the fuel to get up to the level where the planes fly. So, from an environmental point of view, is that also a big asset, or is that really not a factor when it comes to vertical versus horizontal?
This is almost like going down the petrol and electric vehicle argument. And the reason is, yeah, just like the electric vehicle, you need to look at the totality of what it takes to launch vertically and the totality of what it takes to launch horizontally. So yes, I have to use fuel in an airplane. Yes, I use solid rocket fuel, which is not as good potentially as liquid fuel. Yes, it's at this stage, some of it is not recoverable. We're trying to look at that and see what we can do with that. But on the other side of it, as you say, I'm launching over the ocean. Okay, there's an ocean impact. We have to be aware of that. I'm already launching at height, therefore a lot of those, as you say, to break the inertia and go, I don't have that. But one of the biggest ones is, and I do have a wry smile when we get challenged on environmental. I was watching truckloads of big equipment digging up a pristine peat bog in the north of Scotland just to put a platform there to launch, which gets completely just pushed to one side. Yeah, it doesn't matter about that. And you go, well, it does matter about that because it's all about the totality of launch. And each of us will have our environmental challenges. We understand that. But I put this to people. Satellites are not going away. In fact, they're just getting more and more. And the more we live our lives, the more we want more from space. And therefore, we have to have those capabilities. So I can just hear the sound of freedom. How nice that is. Anyway, on a Thursday morning. It's not the Air Force flying then. They'd have gone weekend by now. So yeah, so environmentally we have to take the totality of it. We have some challenges there. Vertical has some challenges there, But I think overall, the way we can do things does mitigate it a lot against it. And also the other thing is the rate at which smart fuels are coming out now. Things are changing. So there are hybrid gels that are, between solid. So that's changing almost sort of monthly, 6 monthly. So I think we can get around some of that. But yeah, there are environmental impacts on both, but they're not going away in terms of the space and what we take from space.
Absolutely. As well. And the last question from my side is we hear so much, don't we, from governments, including the UK government, about their investment in satellites is about defense or it has a sort of defensive nature, a government spending, a protectionist nature. That's where they want to invest. And do you see the future when it comes to satellites? Is vertical launch going to be something that, particularly the private sector, horizontal launch, is that going to be something you think will be spurred on and fueled by government, and will they allocate spending there? Or do you think it's going to be more to do with the private sector wanting to find ever more efficient ways to put satellites up in space?
So one of the challenges we have right now, as certainly from let's take the UK as an example, is through SDSR in a defense department across the rest of Whitehall where there's no money. How do you bring on new capabilities when old ones or existing programs are still scrabbling to find the right amount of money to fulfill their program? It's a very difficult thing to answer. From my perspective, though, and we have gone in at the highest level as high as we can, just to say is, look, we're going to do this anyway. We're going to develop it. It's going to be used globally. You already own a C-17. You have the ability here to have this capability when you need it. It doesn't cost you a penny. And I feel quite strongly that our message should be heard, not because defense has to use us, but if you're in a situation where there is no money and you've got something handed to you on a plate, and that's all it is, it's just endorsement of our capability, of what we can do for UK space. Why would you not do that? Is the first point. The second point is, which I think is even more stronger than it has ever been, in terms of coalition. And if you look at, Australia, UK, US, that relationship that's building right now in terms of global protection, all C-17 nations, all can share the same ambition, all can have launch capability, all can share ideas, thoughts on what to do with it. It doesn't cost anything. They can just talk to us, and we can do whatever we need to do. So it's very frustrating, and it's very hard when you're a private company. It's almost like, please, sir, can I have some more? Type thing. When the rhetoric coming out, certainly from a UK perspective, we need to do procurement differently. We need to look at things differently. We need to look at startups in a different way that offer something. Truly find me another space company in the UK. I would say maybe globally, but certainly UK, that has a global strategic reach into some of these areas. And I think you struggle to find it. Yet we're there. We've got South America. So there are coalitions and alliances that can be made within space that we're trying to get HMG to understand.
And so for now, do you think the private sector will lead in terms of investing in in horizontal launch, or where do you see the business coming from in the next 5 years?
Uh, I think the last 2 years has been really difficult in terms of space investment. The other thing is private sector investment in launch has been marred by failure, a domination of Elon, and that's just in the vertical arena, which is more traditional. When you come with something out of left field, there's a lot of sucking of teeth. And the number of meetings I've had where I'm having to explain it to somebody. If I'm having to explain it to somebody who doesn't intuitively get it, I'm wasting my time. And so, but what I've seen in the last 6 months is a definite turn of the tide. But still, it's going to be in the private sector, predominantly. And there's some really cool opportunities there for various people. You know, when you talk about these, you know, the Jim Ratcliffes or whatever of this world, or people who are bright, who've got a long way. You just need people who have a vision, who can understand the vision, and who can understand. If a government doesn't want to do it, you could have a family office or something that could invest in a space capability, not necessarily us, but a space capability that has massive strategic consequences. Because once you've invested in that, people will have it. But you're at the hub controlling it. It's not a government that's invested in it. It's an individual who had that vision, who understood how it can dominate. And that's a very interesting dynamic. Because then the government, as soon as you've got it and it's up and running, the government comes doffing its cap and going, hey, can we have a look at you, please? Where you go knocking on the door and go, hey, can you have a look at me, please? And they go, it's a bit untraditional, I'm not sure, a bit difficult. I've got other things I want to invest in and stuff. So I think that is breaking now, but it's certainly been a challenge over the last 2 years.
Yeah, and let's hope that the vision that you clearly have in building, a successful company that's looking at novel ways, new ways, and perhaps, and certainly from a lawyer's perspective, incredible ways of ensuring unfettered, free access to space and not allowing any individual company or government to control that, is superb. I think the use of existing resources, so you're not digging up areas of land in each nation to do much the same thing. Absolutely superb. And I really wish you every success and all that sail in Astrius for really changing the paradigm and getting the world to wake up to alternatives when it comes to accessing space. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Kevin, and you never cease to amaze me in terms of how long distance your ability to see is, and I just hope that the world can catch up and support you and support all that you're doing. So thank you for your time.
Mark, as always, it's a great pleasure anytime. And I'll close with a quote. My chairman's George Simbala, Sir George. When we're going through the carrier program and stuff, he said, "You're like a little dog that bites onto the ankle and won't let go to get things through." And by God, this is another example of it. It's tough. We'll make it work. We will make a difference. And I think at the end of it, we'll be able to look back and still say with pride, forget anything else, that this was an idea that came in the pub and we took it to the market.
I love it. That's absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Cheers, Mark.
Thank you.